And after the match, he went to the back, the gorilla, and told Vince McMahon, "Vince, the Olympic boy is a little El Stiffa."
Kurt Angle is finally opening up about why he and many other wrestlers couldn't stand Hulk Hogan, revealing a mix of backstage betrayals and shady politics that showed Hogan's influence on some of wrestling's dirtiest business, as Angle explains that when he moved from Olympic champion to pro wrestler, he expected tough competition but wasn't ready for the politics behind the scenes. And his stories about Hogan show the huge difference between the heroic public image and the man wrestlers actually dealt with. Because to millions, Hogan was the patriotic, real American, preaching training, prayers, and vitamins. But in the locker room, he was seen as a manipulator who used politics to protect his own spot while hurting others' careers. And maybe the clearest example of his manipulative side came after the 1991 Survivor Series match with The Undertaker. A story that proves how far Hogan would go, even making up injuries to save his image and put someone else's career at risk. Since after losing the WWF Championship to The Undertaker via a tombstone piledriver, Hogan claimed the move caused a serious neck injury, which was completely false. And the effect of this lie was huge, because trust between performers is everything in wrestling, and falsely saying someone is unsafe can destroy their career. And later video proved The Undertaker's tombstone was perfectly safe, exposing Hogan's claim as a lie. But for a while, The Undertaker's job was in jeopardy simply because Hogan couldn't handle losing clean without creating an excuse to protect his image, revealing a deeper problem in Hogan's mindset: his inability to separate personal ego from professional duty. And Kurt Angle's own experiences only confirm how far Hogan would go to stay on top.
And Hulk Hogan, during the match, I had to hit him in the back and knock him off the ring apron so we could get a quick false finish in and make the fans believe it was going to be the finish. When I went over and to hit him, I hit him and he held onto the rope and stayed on the ring apron. I'm like, he's staring at the finish. Like, he should be on the floor selling. So the next time I went over, I laid into him as hard as I could and I knocked him off the apron the second time. And after the match, he went to the back, the gorilla, and told Vince McMahon, "Vince, the Olympic boy is a little El Stiffa."
This story is especially revealing because it shows Hogan's refusal to follow even basic professional rules. As when Angle hit him the first time exactly as planned in their match choreography, Hogan didn't sell the move properly, forcing Angle to hit him harder than necessary. And instead of admitting he had gone off script, Hogan ran to Vince McMahon to complain that Angle was being too stiff, perfectly capturing the kind of self-serving manipulation that made Hogan so frustrating for his co-workers. And Angle's story is far from the only one, because the same pattern appears again and again in accounts from other wrestlers who worked with Hogan across different eras, with Scott Steiner's story standing out as one of the clearest and harshest examples of Hogan's behind-the-scenes influence and his willingness to interfere in the careers of others.
Some guys in the back doors that told me what was going on most of the time, but a lot of times I didn't know, like that was a real thing back then. The older guys keeping the younger guys down, like when I said that I got beat my first, match after turning heel, the call was made by Hulk Hogan to have me get beat. So, and the only reason I knew that because I knew somebody that was in the vicinity of.
Steiner's revelation shows that Hogan's influence went far beyond his own matches and storylines, as he actively interfered in other wrestlers' booking decisions, using his backstage power to hold back potential rivals. And this wasn't just about protecting his own position, but about controlling the entire wrestling world to serve his own interests.
Like we did a Nitro in Buffalo, and I knew who I had to wrestle, per se, but 10 minutes before the shows go on air, 10 to 8, I didn't know if it was going to happen or not. We had to wait till Hogan got to the building and say, "Clear it. Yeah, you can do it," to have written down.
The pattern becomes even clearer when you look at Hogan's approach to creative control during his WCW run. Because when he joined World Championship Wrestling in 1994, his contract included an unprecedented clause giving him full veto power over storylines and match outcomes. And while it's normal for top stars to have some say in their characters, the level of control Hogan demanded and how he used it caused major problems for the company and his fellow wrestlers, with one of the most infamous examples coming at Starrcade 1997, when Hogan changed the planned clean loss to Sting and insisted on a controversial fast count finish, disappointing fans and completely undercutting Sting's long-awaited victory. Showing this wasn't about protecting the story or creative direction, but about Hogan protecting himself. It was pure ego protection, as Hogan simply couldn't accept losing cleanly to Sting, even though that loss would have given fans the payoff they had been waiting for all year. And the tension finally exploded at Bash at the Beach 2000, when Hogan refused to lose to Jeff Jarrett as planned, sparking a public showdown with Booker Vince Russo, who, frustrated by Hogan's refusal to follow the script, told Jarrett to lie down in the ring, letting Hogan win without a fight. And while Hogan walked out thinking he had won, moments later, Russo cut a fiery promo live on air, exposing Hogan's backstage politics, and Hogan later sued WCW for breach of contract, a move that only worsened the company's financial problems and sped up its collapse into WWE's hands. But perhaps no story shows Hogan's manipulative behavior more clearly than his long and bitter history with Bret Hart.
I worked with Hulk a lot, and I taught him a lot and helped him when he first started. And when he became a big star, I always thought we were pretty good friends. But the day when I won the title, I guess I was no longer Hulk's friend anymore. Because I remember the first time I saw him, I went up to say hi to him, walked down the ramp going into the building, and he was standing against the wall talking to Brutus Beefcake. And I walked up to him, I said, "Hey, Terry," I came up to shake his hand, and he had his arms crossed like this, and he wouldn't even take my hand. He wouldn't shake my hand. I remember just looking at me and sort of nodding and talking to Beefcake. And so I remember just standing there like this with my hand out for about 20 seconds, and I just walked away, and I was like, "F him."
Hart's account reveals just how personal Hogan's manipulation could get, as the moment Bret became WWF champion, their friendship seemed to vanish and was replaced by Hogan's cold calculation to protect his own position at the top. And in his autobiography and interviews, Hart explained that Hogan refused to drop the WWF championship to him in 1993, claiming Bret's smaller size made the match unbelievable, which is a classic example of Hogan's pattern of using excuses and ego to stay in control, even at the expense of the company's future.
The thing got carried away on Twitter, and my brother, like I said, my brother just isn't going to ever back down from anybody, and he doesn't like Hogan to begin with, and he doesn't like Flair, and so my brother likes you, you're good. If he don't like you, he don't care, and he'll just do whatever he can. And my brother's been pretty successful with his money and everything, so money's never an issue for him. So when Hogan made some comments and stuff about the TNA and being down there and all that, my brother just let him have it.
Hart's blunt words show the frustration shared by many wrestlers who ended up on the wrong side of Hogan's backstage politics. And what made Hogan's treatment of Hart especially clear was that it happened after Bret had already proven himself as a legitimate main event star and WWE champion, as this wasn't about Hart not being ready for the spotlight, but about Hogan's refusal to pass the torch to anyone he saw as a threat to his own legacy. And Kevin Nash, who worked closely with Hogan during the NWO era, later gave a brutally honest account of Hogan's methods.
Do I like Hulk Hogan? No, I don't. I think he's a phony piece of shit.
Even wrestlers who once admired Hogan eventually grew disillusioned as his manipulative behavior poisoned locker rooms and relationships, with the Richard Belzer incident in 1985, showing how Hogan's disregard for others extended beyond wrestling when he applied a front chin lock on live TV, causing Belzer to pass out, fall, and crack his head, which led to a lawsuit and a major settlement. And instead of taking responsibility, Hogan downplayed the event just as he had done countless times backstage when confronted over his actions, making denial, control, and self-preservation the blueprint of his career, as whether it was betraying colleagues, rewriting narratives, or manipulating outcomes. Hogan always ensured he looked like the hero no matter who paid the price. And the betrayals Kurt Angle and countless others witnessed weren't isolated incidents, but the defining marks of a man whose greatest performance wasn't in the ring, but behind the curtain, with the most significant betrayal revealed through Jesse the Body Ventura, whose account of attempted unionization in the 1980s shows how far Hogan was willing to sacrifice his fellow wrestlers for personal gain, because during the height of Hulkamania and WWF's national expansion, Ventura, already a respected performer and commentator, saw wrestlers being exploited, earning millions for the company while facing injury, financial insecurity, and no benefits, and drawing on his Screen Actors Guild experience and his father's union background, Ventura proposed a union to provide basic protections, lower his own health costs from $5,000 to around $1,250, and give wrestlers a modest $500 monthly pension after years of service. And in a locker room full of men who had given their bodies and souls to the business, Ventura passionately painted a vision for fairness, dignity, and collective power, only to have it crushed by Hogan, whose actions had long-lasting consequences for the wrestling industry.
Right now, I pay $5,000 a year for health care for my family. If we had a union, I might only have to pay $1,250, because there's strength in numbers.
Sure.
I said, what about all the guys I've seen that give 30 years to this business, and in the end, they ain't got a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of? If we had a union, maybe they could retire with $500 a month. something.
Yeah.
Ventura's push for a wrestlers' union was inspired by an encounter that showed the stark difference between how athletes in other sports were treated and how wrestlers were exploited, which made him see how unfair the system had become and fueled his determination to fight for basic protections and dignity for his peers.
Did it for me. I was in Las Vegas and I got on an elevator. And you know who got on the elevator with me?
Who?
A great big offensive guard from the Oakland Raiders by the name of Gene Upshaw. Do you know who Gene Upshaw was?
Yeah.
Head of the NFL Players Association. I got on that elevator and Gene Upshaw, I said, "Hi, Gene. Hey, Jesse, nice to meet you." Gene's big black finger went up in the air and he goes, "You boys need a union."
What happened next became one of the most controversial betrayals in wrestling history, as the very man who had built Hulkamania turned against the collective effort, putting his own interests above the welfare of his fellow wrestlers and forever changing the course of the industry.
And I gave my impassioned speech, right? The next day I go home, my phone rings, it's Vince. The union, da-da-da. I said, "Vince, I fought him. I said, "Vince, I'm not talking about just fighting you and that." I said, "Right now, this was 1980.
The day after Ventura made his passionate case for unionization, Vince McMahon called him directly, having been informed about the discussions by Hulk Hogan himself, a fact later confirmed during McMahon's sworn deposition in Ventura's lawsuit against the WWF over video royalties.
When my attorney said, "Mr. McMahon, has there ever been a union in wrestling?" And Vince said, "No." He said, "Has anyone ever tried to?" And Vince said, "Well, I think Jesse Ventura spouted his mouth off about it once before." And my attorney said, "Did you hear Mr. Ventura?" "No." "Well, then how do you know?" With no hesitation, Vince went, "Hulk Hogan."
Ventura recounted the moment he realized Hogan had betrayed him, capturing the shock and disappointment of learning that the man he once trusted had undermined his union efforts for personal gain.
And I didn't show no emotion, but I almost fell to the floor because Hogan was a friend. And I found out, my God, it was Hogan who stooged me to Vince for trying to, and Hogan denies it. Well, Vince admitted it under oath in a federal deposition, and he also admitted it on Larry King's show, because Larry breached the subject with him, and he backed it up again.
The impact of Hogan's betrayal went far beyond personal animosity with Ventura, because by tipping off McMahon about the union effort, Hogan effectively destroyed wrestlers' chance at collective bargaining during wrestling's most profitable era. And decades later, as many performers face long-term injuries, financial struggles, and no health care benefits, Ventura's warnings proved prophetic. With Hogan's motivation clear, the huge financial gap between wrestling's top stars and everyone else made protecting his own wealth more important than standing with his peers.
I went to court, I saw in WrestleMania 3, Hogan got paid more than all of us combined. Now, why would he want a union when he's getting taken care of? Imagine that, WrestleMania 3. 93,000 people, and he got more than Andre the Giant and all the rest of us combined. If there was a union, would that happen?
While most wrestlers in the 1980s earned between $50,000 and $100,000 a year, Hogan was reportedly making $2 to $3 million annually. And in a 2024 Netflix docuseries, he admitted he opposed the union because his high pay and perks made it unnecessary, saying he was making far more than the other guys, and a union would have leveled that out. With the emotional weight of this betrayal still clear in Ventura's words even decades later.
Hulk were once good friends.
Yeah.
What's the likelihood of that ever being repaired?
Never.
What?
Can't trust him. I'm not friends with anyone I don't.
Here was a man who had once considered Hogan a friend, someone he had helped build the spectacle that turned WWF into a global phenomenon. Yet Ventura never received an apology for the betrayal, and the wound clearly never healed, with the full weight of Hogan's actions becoming even clearer when looking at what Ventura went on to achieve after leaving wrestling.
And so when I came back to Vince, I said, "You don't need to worry about me. If these dummies don't want to protect themselves, screw them. I tried." I said, I got my SAG card, and I'm on retirement right now. I started at age 70. Started collecting, and I made it up to where I make over $50,000 a year in SAG retirement.
While Ventura secured his own financial future through his Screen Actors Guild membership, the wrestlers who stayed behind continued to suffer in a system with no long-term security or benefits. And the union betrayal wasn't just a missed opportunity, but condemned an entire generation of wrestlers to financial vulnerability and health problems with no safety net, with Kurt Angle learning about incidents like this helping him understand the complicated dynamics he faced with Hogan, as other wrestlers had warned Angle about Hogan's reputation for backstage politics, creating a negative first impression he later realized was rooted in reality and shaped by betrayals like Ventura's, with Randy Savage, who had his own troubled history with Hogan, offering further insight into the depth of resentment Hogan's behavior created among his peers.
This situation with me and Hulk Hogan, it's just, we've been acquaintances at best, never been best friends, never been friends, just a business type thing on the television.
That's how we do.
That's not the way he does it.
Yeah.
He's a wuss. You see what I'm saying? He goes on the airwaves and he disrespects me. He gives me a shot over the radio, gives me a shot over the TV, he gives me a shot over the internet, here and there, but nothing face to face.
Yeah.
Nothing face to face. Nothing face to face.
The Union betrayal stands out as perhaps the most consequential of Hogan's betrayals, affecting not just his relationships with wrestlers like Ventura, but shaping the wrestling industry's labor dynamics for decades, revealing the true character behind the real American persona. A man willing to sacrifice his colleagues' future security to protect his own privileged position, and the scandals, manipulative behavior, and profound betrayals Kurt Angle and others witnessed backstage were eventually overshadowed by public controversies that stripped away the last remnants of Hogan's heroic image, showing that these events were never just professional disappointments or locker room politics, but exposed the deeper flaws of a man who prioritized self-interest above all else, fundamentally challenging everything Hogan claimed to stand for, and leaving former colleagues feeling betrayed not just as wrestlers, but as human beings who had trusted the values he publicly promoted. With the steroid scandal of the early 1990s representing perhaps the most significant breach of his public image and the trust of those around him, because for years, Hogan had built his brand on encouraging kids to live healthy lives through training, prayers and vitamins, making his catchphrases synonymous with wholesome values and natural achievement. Yet that carefully crafted image came crashing down during the federal investigation into WWF's steroid distribution practices, exposing a stark contradiction between his public persona and private actions.
And I found it so strange that he would actually go on a national televised show and say that he had never used steroids, only for medical reasons. That when I first met him in 1975, 76 time frame, that he told me he had been taking steroids, injecting himself with steroids for a full year before he met me. You know, and he said that to my face. And then to get into his career, his extremely successful career, and then to go on to a national televised show like that and deny that he had ever taken steroids was almost so, it was so ridiculous that it was laughable.
Superstar Billy Graham's account highlights the sheer audacity of Hogan's deception. As in 1991, Hogan appeared on the Arsenio Hall show and denied using steroids, claiming his physique was all natural, a deliberate lie broadcast to millions of fans who saw him as a role model. And 3 years later, during the federal trial, Hogan admitted under oath that he had been using anabolic steroids since 1976, with the hypocrisy staggering to his fellow wrestlers who had long known the truth. Because while publicly telling children to avoid drugs and live clean, Hogan had relied on performance-enhancing drugs for nearly his entire career, and then lied about it on national television, betraying the trust of millions, with Jesse Ventura noting that the absurdity of the situation was impossible to ignore.
Actually, when he was here in Minneapolis, that's who you went to get him from.
Really?
Well, you'll say that's not true, but for him, like the common laugh used to be when he used to tell the kids to say their prayers and take their vitamins. In the dressing room, we'd always laugh and say, orals or injectables, when he'd tell them to take their vitamins, because a slang term for steroids is vitamins.
Even the steroid scandal pales in comparison to the racist remarks that surfaced in 2015, revelations that destroyed any remaining illusions about Hogan's character among his wrestling peers, as transcripts from a 2007 sex tape showed Hogan repeatedly using racial slurs while expressing discomfort about his daughter dating a black man, even saying he was a racist, and WWE immediately terminated his contract, removed him from the Hall of Fame, and scrubbed his presence from their website, with the impact on the wrestling community profound, forcing longtime colleagues to reconcile their memories of Hogan with this ugly reality, and wrestlers like Mark Henry and other black performers expressed deep hurt and disappointment, as the man who had once claimed to embody American values revealed he held some of the country's most shameful prejudices.
Gonna rock with Hulk Hogan?
Look, Hogan, again, I've glossed over it a little bit. Hogan's always been great to me. He was a guy who I was a fan of when I was growing up. He's always been personally good to me, but I've seen, like, I mean, I'm not stupid. Like, I see everything that's out there.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's someone who is I think, a victim of his own ego a little bit. And he just doesn't understand how what he does affects people around.
Seth Rollins' measured but critical assessment captures the conflicted emotions many wrestlers felt toward Hogan, as even those who had positive personal experiences with him were forced to face the harsh reality of his character. And Rollins delivered what many saw as a damning indictment of Hogan's lack of genuine remorse, showing how his actions left lasting scars on both colleagues and fans alike.
Dude, if you are not a good person and it's in your moral ethic to not treat everyone with the same respect, regardless of what they do or, you know, where they come from or the color of their skin, like, I got no time for you. Whether he hasn't changed his personal beliefs or he hasn't taken the time to honestly make amends for some of the things he said and done, but you put those two things together, it just go, I mean, you kind of have dug your own grave, man. So and if you don't feel like you want to make that progress in your life with the people around you, then I'm a person that's just not the kind of person I want to associate with. Yeah. So that's how.
The wrestling community reacted in many ways to Hogan's racist remarks, but for many black wrestlers, the betrayal cut too deep, leaving them unable to forgive or forget the harm his actions caused.
Hulk Hogan put me and my brother in a position to do what we did. We got a push because of Hulk Hogan. And I'll never forget that. And I will always be indebted to him for that. That does not mean I respect what he did. I respect what he, where he is now.
The sex tape scandal that revealed these issues also exposed another troubling side of Hogan's character, as the tape featured him with Heather Clem, the wife of his friend and radio personality Bubba the Love Sponge, and was recorded without his knowledge. And while Hogan successfully sued Gawker for invasion of privacy, winning a $140 million judgment, the circumstances raised serious questions about his judgment and loyalty to friends, with even his attempts at redemption and apology seen by many wrestling peers as self-serving and incomplete.